My name is Whitney Swafford, and for my experiment today, I'm going to be making bread from a recipe from kingarthurbaking.com. So the ingredients that we're going to need for today's experiment are 4.5 to 5 cups of King Arthur unbleached bread flour, which is 542 to 600 grams, 1 tablespoon or 11 grams of sugar, 2 1/4 teaspoons instant yeast, 2.5 teaspoons or 15 grams of table salt, 1 2/3 cups or 379 grams of water, and cornmeal for coating the pan. And the water is going to be at a lukewarm temperature of 90 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. These are all the ingredients we're going to be using. And these are the measuring tools and the bowl to mix everything in. The first step in this procedure was to add 5 cups of flour, which we did by filling up this measuring cup 5 times. The next thing we're adding is 1 tablespoon or 11 grams of sugar. The next ingredient we're adding is 2.5 teaspoons of table salt or 15 grams. The next thing we're adding is 2 1/4 teaspoons of this instant yeast, which is equal to 1 of these packets. I have 1 2/3 cups of water measured out and heating it on the stove until it reaches a temperature of 90 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that the water is at 106 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to add it to the rest of the ingredients. Now that we have all the ingredients in the bowl, we're going to be mixing it with this wooden spoon until it turns into a dough. The next step is to knead the dough for 6 minutes. When the dough is kneaded, the gluten proteins uncoil, which strengthens the dough network. Once I finished kneading the dough, we put it in a bowl with foil on top and are going to let it sit here for 1 to 2 hours until it doubles in size as it rises. Making bread is a relatively easy thing to do. Basically, all you have to do is mix the ingredients and wait for it to rise and bake it in the oven. But there are actually a lot of chemical principles that allow for that to happen. So flour, which is one of the main ingredients, contains the proteins glutenin and gliadin, which are referred to as gluten. And when water is added, a network is formed by hydrogen bonding and disulfide cross-linkage. And when the dough is kneaded, the gluten proteins uncoil, which strengthen the dough's network. Another thing present in flour is starch, which is a long chain of connected sugar molecules. Amylase, which is an enzyme, converts starch to maltose, which is a disaccharide formed from 2 units of glucose. The maltase enzyme, which is present in yeast, catalyzes the hydrolysis of maltose into 2 simple sugars of glucose. This and other sugars are used by the yeast for fermentation. Fermentation is a chemical process where molecules such as glucose are broken down anaerobically. So the yeast feeds on the sugar contained within the dough and produces carbon dioxide and alcohol. The bubbles of the carbon dioxide forming cause the bread to rise, and kneading can make the size more uniform. The alcohol is boiled off during the baking. So the salt is important because it can slow down the fermentation by the yeast releasing some of its water to salt by osmosis, and this then can strengthen the gluten structure. The lukewarm water is important because yeast is more active in higher temperatures because more molecules have enough energy to react. However, the water cannot be too hot because at high temperatures, the enzymes which control the reaction will become denatured or destroyed and will lose their activity. The kneading is an important step because it makes the gluten stronger and more elastic by warming up the strands, allowing proteins to expand during fermentation and encourages the molecules to bond. This is important for better volume and gas retention and if you want a good loaf of bread. It's been a little over an hour and the dough has risen to double its size, so we're going to take it out and cut it in half to bake. Now that we have the dough split in half, we're going to roll them up into logs before we bake. Now that we have the dough rolled into 2 logs, we've placed it on our baking sheet with cornmeal so the bread doesn't stick and the bottom of the crust will be crunchy. The bread is now lightly covered with greased tinfoil and we're going to let it rise for 45 minutes before we put it into the oven. We let the dough rise for 45 minutes and then cut 3 slashes in each so the bread would rise more evenly. Bake the bread for around 20 minutes and this is our final product. Now we just wait for it to cool for our taste test. Bread has been a fun way to show the chemistry behind baking. Thank you for watching!